there are 37,000 people employed by the nation of China. They do everything from cloud seeding to end dust situations. And they also made sure that it rained in the Olympics outside of Beijing, so it didn't interfere, and we were rain-free for the Olympics then. But there have been some conditions that have resulted from, and I think we have it in a small section of a mining community in Kentucky, but there actually is this argyria as a result of it. And they're not denying that it happens. These are mostly used for agricultural applications, right?
Well, so first of all, you would not get argyria from silver iodide, once again, because of the iodide atom, although I think that chronic silver exposure is a bad thing. Moreover, even if the silver iodide were to decompose into silver itself, we're operating in the parts per trillion regime, which is far, far, far beneath what would be considered toxic over any time scale for humans or the environment. Then, per your other point, yes, China does have 37 to 40,000 people employed in their weather modification office, and Rainmaker's ultimate vision is, as a show of force, as a show of American technological strength and dominance, to provide fresh powder and snow to the Utah Olympics in 2034, rather than totally cede ground on this really strategically important technology to China and let them do that again, per the 2008 Olympics.
There's one last question.
Go ahead.
St. Thomas Aquinas, I think, proved that which is of matter cannot be of matter as a conclusive proof from a theological perspective. But here's a question I have. Is there a fixed amount of water molecules in a local or in a universal atmosphere?
Critically important question.
Because it would seem to follow that if whatever you're taking from the atmosphere, naturally occurring from the atmosphere to seed a particular targeted area, is taking a natural precipitation or weather pattern from some other area that might also be depending upon its natural cyclical precipitation schedule.
No, so the question of stealing from Peter to pay Paul, right? That is a question as old as cloud seeding itself, and it's one that I think requires sophisticated permitting to ensure that that's not going on. What I'll say is, yes, there's a fixed amount of water on the planet in the atmosphere. However, 91% of all the water, so vapor, liquid, and ice, that traverses the continental United States does not precipitate over the United States. Moreover, most precipitating clouds are only about 20 to 40% efficient, so most of the water from precipitating clouds does not actually come down. Moreover, lots of clouds don't ever naturally precipitate. And so what you can do with sophisticated radar processing like we've developed or probes is identify clouds that are never going to naturally precipitate or that are going to precipitate over the oceans, and then purely do positive sum seeding by targeting those clouds rather than depleting other watersheds.
Sorry, I have one follow-up question. There's a tipping point for, we're going back to third grade here, but cirrus, cumulus nimbus. There's a tipping point when you reach a saturation level of a cloud formation where it lets go and just lets loose. So even in its travels, and I agree with you, but the supposition is that even in its travels, it may be picking up more, becoming more dense, and at some point falling wherever it falls. But if you were to go ahead and target an area, let's say, for instance, by way of exercise, to bring potable water to the west, we wanted to go ahead and dam up and then fill the Grand Canyon, that is placing and depositing a large volume of water, which would otherwise be precipitation somewhere in the world. So my question is, if you're depositing a large volume of water in one particular area, doesn't it naturally follow that it's taking away from some other area later on?
No. Now, climate systems, weather systems, very complicated, very dynamic. And again, targeting clouds...
I'm not that bright, so you can educate me.
No, me neither. But we've got some great scientists at Rainmaker, thanks to Dr. Caitlin Suski. She's watching at home. Anyway, no, the oceans... the oceans and evapotranspiration from land are constantly replenishing these systems. Most atmospheric rivers that come from the Pacific, most of the tropical systems that come up from the South Atlantic, their vapor never makes it to the other coast. So we would never deplete Europe by seeding and by inducing precipitation on the western United States. We would never deplete Greenland by inducing precipitation over the eastern United States from tropical systems. Yes, there's a fixed amount, but there is so much land to traverse and so much water to traverse that would be picked up by these systems later that the, 1 to 20% in the most favorable cases of precipitation enhancement from these systems would not impede downwind precipitation.
Go for it.
You said 1 to 20%.
Mm-hmm.
In a 1 hour storm, how much water falls and accumulates on 1 acre of land? Do you know? I do.
In a 1 hour storm, it depends on the rain rate.
In a 1 hour average rainfall onto one 42,000 square foot acre of land, do you know how many gallons of water fall into 1 acre?
Average rainfall in Florida, it depends on the system.
You pick wherever you want.
In the Central Valley, I think it's about 12 inches cumulatively per year, so it's probably something like a 20th of an acre foot or so, which would be like 50,000 gallons-ish.
In 65 minutes in South Florida, in Miami-Dade County, 1 acre of land can take up to 360,000 gallons of water.
So it's about an acre foot, yeah.
So when you say 20% of an area's targeted rainfall, you're talking about tens of millions of gallons of water.
Well, okay, so 2 points on that. First of all, in all of our permits and for all of our licenses, we have suspension criteria, meaning if a system is bound to naturally precipitate above a certain threshold that would cause flooding or risk of flooding, if the soil is saturated such that it couldn't retain more water, then we suspend all operations. And the farmers that we work with often get pissed off about that because they want the water. But for the sake of safety, for the sake of liability, we don't operate when there is risk of flooding. So that's the first point. Then the second point is, in the most optimistic cases, in the most favorable cases, you can enhance precipitation that much. In some clouds, and this is a point worth reiterating, in some clouds you can't make them precipitate at all. If you have a blue sky, we can't make a cloud. If you see long streaks in the sky, be they contrails or chemtrails, that has nothing to do with cloud seeding. Cloud seeding takes existing clouds with lots of liquid water in them and induces precipitation based on what the cloud has available. I think that risk of flooding, concerns about flooding, it's something that absolutely should be regulated, and I would advocate for that in the state of Florida, just the same as Texas and Utah and Idaho have.